The Lost Expedition by Sebastian Mackintosh. Prologue. The North Sea was angry that morning. Waves heaved and hissed along the crescent of Nairn Beach, hurling coils of seaweed and fragments of driftwood onto the damp silver sand. Above, gulls wheeled like sentries, their cries distant, almost reverent. The wind, sharp with salt and centuries, whispered through the marram grass that lined the dunes, as if urging the earth to keep its secrets buried. But the sea had other plans. At 6:14 a.m., a jogger, Darren Milne, 41, paramedic from Inverness, called emergency services. His voice, clipped with adrenaline, reported 2 bodies on the shore, about 20 feet apart, not decomposed, dressed like characters from a bloody museum. By 6:22, the scene was cordoned off. By 6:39, Detective Inspector Isla Mackenzie was on site, boots sinking into the wet sand as she approached the covered figures. Her partner, DS Lorna Dre, peeled back the tarpaulin slowly, revealing the first corpse. Male, mid-30s. Dark hair slicked back, clothes soaked but strangely intact. A high-collared wool coat, breeches, leather boots soled with brass tacks. The stitching, buttons and cut all screamed early 19th century. Not costume, not theatrical, authentic. Alarmingly so. The second body lay nearby, curled slightly, as though trying to protect something. Also male, lighter complexion. An open waistcoat exposed a fine linen shirt stained with sand and seawater. In his right hand, clenched tightly even in death, was a pocket watch, brass casing, ornate dial. The back engraved with the words, "To HC from EW, may you find time where I could not." There was no sign of trauma, no bloating, no sea damage. Their skin was pale but unblemished. They looked recent, as if they had died only hours ago. And yet, in their coat pockets, a folded, brittle newspaper clipping from the Inverness Courier, dated July 1829. Isla turned it over in gloved hands. The headline was faded but legible. Mysterious departure of experimental vessel Argante, Northern Magnetic Survey delayed. Beside it, in the corner of the page, a handwritten note in quill ink. "We crossed. Seal the breach." Isla frowned. Seal the breach? But before she could say more, the pathologist, a seasoned man with 30 years of tide-pooled corpses under his belt, let out a breathless sound. He was crouching over the second body, the watch in his hand. "It just ticked," he whispered. The watch ticked again, once, then silence, then twice, steady, then again, tick, tick, tick. It was keeping perfect time. Chapter 1. The Disruption. Detective Inspector Isla Mackenzie leaned against the bonnet of her unmarked Volvo, arms crossed tight beneath her dark coat. The sea stretched before her like a wound, grey, restless, and indifferent. For the last 20 minutes, she'd been watching the tide roll in, eyes fixed on the curve of the beach, where 2 stretchers now waited beside the forensic tent. She hated cold cases, but she hated ones that smelled like fantasy even more. DS Lorna Dre approached with a thermal flask in one hand and a grimace in the other. "Still warm," she said, offering the flask. "Unlike our friends over there." Isla took a sip. Black coffee, no sugar, just like her mood. "What's the verdict?" she asked. Clothes date to early 1800s. No zippers, no synthetic thread. Even the stitching matches hand-sewn patterns. And the ink on that newspaper? Iron gall, like what they used back then. "Props. Too authentic," Dre replied. "Even the boot nails are era-specific. Lab says the fabric's aged right, but the bodies..." She trailed off. The bodies were fresh, pink under the fingernails. No rigor mortis yet. Core temp suggested they'd been dead less than 12 hours, yet every stitch of clothing, every item in their possession screamed 19th century. It didn't line up. Isla turned her gaze back toward the water, watching a gull pick at something in the surf. "Get me someone from the university, history department, textiles, archaeology. I don't care. I want an expert here before noon." "Already done," Dre nodded. "But I also called someone else." Isla raised an eyebrow. "Someone who might make sense of that watch." Inverness, 8:43 a.m. Dr. Alastair Monroe hadn't slept. Again, his cluttered office smelled of dry paper, burnt coffee, and neglected ambition. Stacks of journals leaned like exhausted soldiers on his desk. His inbox blinked with another departmental complaint. He ignored it. Instead, he turned the brass pocket watch over in his hand. Not the one from Nairn, his. A nearly identical model. 18th century casing. Custom escapement. Inscription on the back. 2 a.m. Remember the field bends. He didn't remember who had given it to him. Or rather, he did. But the memory came from a dream. Or another life. or both. The phone rang. He answered without looking. "Dr. Monroe, it's DS Dre, Inverness Police." There was a pause. "I think we've found something you'll want to see." Nairn Beach, 10:06 a.m. Alistair Monroe stood over the corpses, silent. His eyes flicked from the clothing to the hands, then to the engraving on the recovered pocket watch. He didn't touch it. "Where did you find them?" he asked quietly. "Washed ashore around 6, Isla replied. "No IDs, no prints, no signs of struggle, no waterlogging, as if they were dropped here." "Not dropped," Monroe said, voice dry. "Deposited." Isla's jaw tightened. "Explain." He crouched beside the forensic table, scanning the mechanical movements of the watch through a magnifier. "This is a harmonic anchor," he said. "Sorry? It's not just a watch. It's calibrated to a frequency, a field. It uses minute mechanical deviations to attune itself to spatial irregularities. You'd need to understand Wren's resonance field theories too." "Wren?" "Elias Wren," Monroe said, standing. "An inventor, engineer, natural philosopher, obsessed with magnetic fields and time displacement." "Displacement? Yes," Monroe replied. He believed time wasn't linear, that it could be influenced, nudged. Isla exhaled sharply through her nose. "So you're telling me these men traveled here, from the past?" "No," he said. "I'm telling you they tried to travel through time, and something went wrong." Isla took a step back from the forensic table. The breeze off the water was picking up, sharp with brine and static. Behind her, DS Dre was speaking with the pathologist, trying to mask the concern in her voice, but Isla could feel the weight settling in over the team. Something wasn't right, and Monroe wasn't helping by sounding half scientist, half prophet. She faced him again. "Assume I play along," Isla said. "Assume I believe these two were part of some experiment in 1829. How does that explain their arrival now, and in this condition?" Monroe folded his arms. Elias Wren believed that magnetic interference near coastal fault lines could act as temporal conduits. He called them harmonic folds, essentially thin points in the fabric of time. "And you believe one of those is here? In Nairn?" "I believe it was here," Monroe said, "and might still be." He gestured toward the sea, toward a low curve of cliffside that jutted northward like a broken tooth. "There's a collapsed cave about half a mile that way. I visited it once during my postgraduate work, before it was sealed off after a landslide in 2008. Inside, we found scorched rock, fused metals, fragments of compass glass that had been magnetically inverted. It didn't make sense then. It does now." Isla considered this, the tension crawling along her spine like a shadow made real. "And you think Wren used that location to test time travel?" "No," Monroe said. "He didn't test it. He executed it. He vanished in 1829 along with his companion and his ship, the Argante. No wreckage, no survivors. Just a final diary entry about crossing the fold and anchoring to the harmonic field. Until today, I assumed it was metaphor." Isla looked again at the bodies, the crispness of their hands, the blood still beneath their fingernails, the detail in the stitching of their clothes, thread-worn but not degraded. "Nobody's going to believe this. They won't have to." Monroe said, "Because if the anchor's ticking..." He glanced toward the evidence table where the watch sat in its padded case, ticking gently like a second heart. "Then something else is coming through." Inverness Police HQ, 2:14 p.m. The photos were pinned across the incident board, high-resolution images of both bodies, close-ups of their clothing, the newspaper clipping, the watch. Isla stood before them with a permanent marker in one hand and a frown burrowed between her brows. On a yellow post-it, she scrawled, "HC equals Henry Carrick?" Monroe had confirmed the initials matched Wren's expedition companion, but that opened more questions than it answered. On the far right of the board, she added, "What is the breach?" DS Dre knocked once and entered with a stack of lab results. Cause of death for both, acute cardiac arrest. No trauma, no drugs, no signs of drowning. They just stopped. Isla nodded slowly. "And the sea?" she asked. "Currents. How far could they have drifted?" Dre shook her head. "That's the thing. No matching currents. Tidal patterns don't support drift from any known origin. The lab is calling it unexplained deposition, like they just appeared." Isla tapped the marker once against her palm. "What else?" "The ink on the newspaper matches 19th century chemical composition. Paper fibers consistent with early Scottish pulp. No artificial aging detected, it's real." "And the handwriting?" Same ink, same paint hand. Lab suggests it was added later. Still old, but not as old as the clipping. Isla narrowed her eyes. So someone found the article and left a message. She reread the words aloud. We crossed, seal the breach. The room seemed colder as the phrase hung in the air. Monroe's flat, 9:07 p.m. Books lay open across every surface. Diagrams of celestial alignments, nautical charts, 19th century expedition maps of northern Scotland. Monroe hovered over a stack of Elias Wren's journals, painstakingly translated and photocopied over decades of personal obsession. He held the watch again. This one was identical to the one in the journal sketches. He pressed his ear to it. Tick, tick, tick. Then, silence. Then a new sound, a stuttering whir, almost mechanical, then gone. Monroe straightened. The time on the watch had changed. It now read 7:42, matching neither GMT nor the actual time. He reached for his notebook and scrawled a single word in block letters: synchronization. Monroe didn't sleep that night. He charted the ticking intervals of both watches, his own and the one recovered from the body. They were out of sync by exactly 2 minutes and 16 seconds. But every hour, the difference narrowed. By dawn, they'd be ticking in perfect unison. He scribbled calculations on the backs of nautical charts, phase frequencies, geomagnetic stress points, Lagrange alignments. It was a madman's tapestry, but Monroe knew better. This was Wren's design. A harmonic bridge, meant to tether moments in time, like pins in a folded map. He turned to his bookshelf and pulled down the journal marked 1829, Final Notes. Inside, a passage he'd once dismissed as metaphor now rang with terrifying clarity. Once the compasses sing in time, the breach cannot be sealed. The sea will forget the present and hunger for the past. Monroe closed the journal slowly. The watches weren't just relics, they were active instruments. Inverness HQ. The next morning, 7:12 a.m. Delilah Mackenzie stood in the evidence room, arms crossed, watching the digital playback loop of the beach scene. Frame by frame, the drone footage showed the two bodies before they were covered. Just a brief note in the Caledonian Journal. EW departs north for private studies near the Moray Firth. That was the last record. Until now. Inverness Museum Archives. Present day, 11:02 a.m. The curator, a trim woman with sharp spectacles and a voice like starched linen, peered at the journal Ela had handed her with a mix of reverence and suspicion. This ink is early 19th century, she murmured, turning a page with tweezers. And the paper? Yes, linen rag. No wood pulp. Consistent with 1820s craftsmanship. Where did you find this? In a sealed cave, Ela replied. Just off the coast. The curator gave her a long look. I'd be careful, Inspector. This may be the most significant archaeological find in the Highlands this century. Ela folded her arms. We're not interested in auctioning it. We're trying to stop something. Monroe stepped forward, gently placing the ticking pocket watch beside the journal. The curator froze. Is that? Her voice trailed off. It's one of Wren's, Monroe said. Still active. She blinked. Active? It's not just a watch. It's a harmonic anchor, part of a field-linking mechanism. Wren theorized that time itself could be navigated if you could stabilize both ends. These devices were his attempt to do that. He called them compasses of memory. The curator stepped back, uneasy now. That sounds dangerously close to pseudoscience. I agree, Monroe said. But the two corpses that washed ashore yesterday, clothed in authentic 1829 attire, carrying one of these devices, with fresh cause of death data and no seawater exposure, suggest something very real happened. The curator stared at the journal, and then said, There's more. She led them to a locked drawer in the museum's restricted archive. Inside, a velvet-lined box. A second pocket watch, larger, heavier, its casing adorned with constellations and etched symbols. Not just a timepiece, a map. It had arrived anonymously in 1936, with no return address. A single note included. The second is buried in the fault. The first has drifted. If found, wait until the tide returns. E. Monroe lifted the watch carefully. It wasn't ticking, but he felt the faintest vibration against his skin. Not sound. Resonance. Monroe sat cross-legged on the museum's slate floor, both watches laid out before him, like surgical instruments. The journal sat open on his lap. He traced the diagrams with a gloved finger, intricate lattices of gears and symbols overlaid with compass bearings and planetary positions. Elias Wren had not simply tried to travel through time. He had attempted to tune into it. The harmonic anchors weren't vehicles, they were keys. Keys designed to lock a specific moment in space-time, to keep it open for as long as the frequency held. The diagrams in the journal depicted two anchors in sync, one at sea, one on land. The one found on the body, drifting, the one in the museum, buried in the fault. And yet, here it was, surfaced years later, dormant but intact. Monroe ran a sensor over the museum watch, his own calibrated EM meter, homemade. The needle twitched. "Still charged," he whispered. "Still active." He looked up at Isla. "If the two anchors realign," he said, "we may not just get echoes from 1829, we could open the breach fully." "A tunnel. To what?" she asked. He looked at her flatly. "To then." Isla left Monroe to his analysis and wandered back through the museum's upper floor. She passed a painting of Nairn Bay from the 1800s, brushstrokes capturing a quiet harbour, narrow boats, and rocky headlands. But there was something else in the corner. She stepped closer. A figure. Barely visible. Half obscured in shadow, standing at the base of the cliffs with something metallic in his hand. A watch. She stared, goosebumps pricking her arms. The plaque below read, "View of the Moray Coast with observers, 1829, artist unknown." Isla pulled out her phone and snapped a photo. Everything was pointing back to that year. The ship, the journal, the bodies, even the cave. And Wren, he wasn't just experimenting with time, he was anchoring it. Coastal Road, dusk. Monroe's old Saab hummed along the road toward the cliffs, the sky bruising to deep lavender. He clutched both watches in a padded case beside him, their ticking nearly synchronized now, less than 5 seconds apart. In the passenger seat, Isla scrolled through scanned police reports from 1936, the year the second watch was anonymously delivered. One report caught her attention. 2 children reported seeing a ghost ship off the Nairn coast, silent, black-sailed, vanishing before it touched shore. Another, local lighthouse keeper found dead. Cause, unexplained cardiac arrest. A broken compass found at his feet, spinning wildly. She looked at Monroe. "This has happened before." He nodded. Wren said the anchor would call them back. Ahead, the sea shimmered strangely, like heat rising off asphalt. And somewhere deep below, in a rock fault, buried for nearly 2 centuries, the tide of time was turning. Low tide bared the rock shelf like exposed ribs. Spray blew sideways through a throat of wind as Isla, Monroe, and the museum's consulting folklorist, Eilith Rennie, picked their way down toward the reopened cave mouth. Headlamps cut cones through mist. Behind them, DS Dre and 2 Socotechs hauled a portable field scanner the size of a tackle box. Eilith walked with surprising balance on the slick stone. Early 30s, Highland-born, she'd grown up hearing wreck stories from her grandfather, stories about the clock ship that sailed wrong time. When Isla called, she came without hesitation. "Your journal references 2 anchors, sea and land," Isla said over the wind. "We've got the one that drifted, the museum piece. Maybe the land anchor?" Monroe shook his head. "I'm no longer sure it is. Look at the engraving alignment. Wrong quadrant. The museum watch might be a calibration duplicate. The real land anchor could still be in the fault." Eilith halted. "If it's still resonant, you'll feel it before you see it." They ducked inside. The cave breathed, slow pulses of colder air pushing out, warmer air pulling in, like lungs. Condensation glittered on the walls. The stone altar where they'd recovered Wren's journal remained undisturbed, tagged and photographed. Beyond it, a narrow fissure split downward into blackness. Monroe opened the padded case and removed both pocket watches, the recovered Carrick watch from the body and the dormant museum duplicate. He set them side by side on the stone. The recovered watch ticked steadily. The museum watch fluttered once, then began to tick, hesitant, searching, until its rhythm matched the other. The portable scanner wailed. Magnetic flux spike, localized EM surge, temperature drop of 3 degrees Celsius in under 10 seconds. Eilith whispered, "Saints preserve us." Monroe aimed a fiberscope into the fissure. Light washed over metal, curving, gear-like, wedged in mineralized sediment. "There," he breathed. "Primary anchor housing, the real one." Rockfall had shattered its outer shell decades, no, centuries ago. Yet the inner structure remained intact, a spiral lattice of bimetallic rings around a magnetite core. Affixed to the perimeter were hand-etched calibration marks corresponding to sidereal positions dated March-July 1829. Interleaved among the brass and iron, a dull, bluish metal no one recognized. Monroe logged aloud for audio record. Composite unknown. Paramagnetic response above expected 19th century metallurgy. Alloy shows microstructural layering consistent with cold work not possible with tools of the period. Hypothesis, either later repair, or Wren worked with experimental smelting inputs undocumented. Bottom line? Wren built something he shouldn't have been able to build, and it's still running. The air shifted. Far out beyond the cave, the surf muted, as if buried under snow. A thin reverb filled the chamber, metallic, cyclic, almost like dozens of watch escapements phasing in and out of sync. Then, voices, muffled, laic, English, shouts, laughter, a fragment of hymn. Eilith stiffened and angled her head, listening hard. They're saying, Duin and Toll? Shut the hole, close the breach, she said. Same phrasing that shows up in the 1843 oral record from Aldern Parish. They thought the devil lived in the tide caves that echoed futures. Nobody believed them. The phrase hung in the stone like fog. Monroe repositioned the watches. As the two ticked across a synchronized second, the fissure flared pale green. Ionization? Revealing a strobing afterimage beyond the rock, a deck rail, oil lamps, men in oilskins hauling rope. One turned, face whipped in wind, and for a split instant, Isla saw him see her. Then darkness. The scanner flatlined, rebooted, and spat corrupted timestamps. 1829, 2025. Eilith crossed herself. That was a vessel, Monroe. The Argante. Pack it, Isla ordered. We lift what we can, log everything, and secure the site. Nobody outside this team knows until we understand the risk. If that fissure opens, I don't want a tourist walking into the 19th century. Or something from the 19th walking out. Back topside, under a bruised twilight, Isla watched the tide climb the rocks and swallow the cave mouth again. She held the museum watch in one palm, the recovered Carrick watch in the other, both now silent. Yet she could feel the beat of them in her wrist bones, like phantom pulses. Eilith joined her. You'll want to trace the paper trail, she said. Shipping registries, customs filings, the Inverness Courier print run that ran the Argante notice, and if that handwritten note, seal the breach, is on the same fibre stock as the clipping, I know where the ledger might be. Where? Nairn Parish records. They archived emergency bounty payments after major storms. 1830 ledgers mention recovery of scientific instruments washed ashore. The name Carrick appears, crossed out. Carrick, H.C. Isla slid the clipping from its evidence sleeve and read the faded lines again in the failing light. Mysterious departure of experimental vessel Argante, Northern Magnetic Survey delayed. Underneath, in darker ink, later hand, we crossed, seal the breach. She looked toward the darkening sea. Tomorrow, she said, we start with the clipping. Chapter 3. The 1829 Clipping. The archives at Nairn Parish Council smelled of mildew, dust, and lemon polish. The kind of place where time didn't just linger, it slept, wrapped in curled parchment and wax-sealed envelopes. Isla Mackenzie had been in murder rooms that felt more comfortable. The building's caretaker, a stooped man named Malcolm Grant, led her and Eilith through narrow aisles lined with wooden drawers and high-mounted ledgers. It'll be in the 1820s bounty rolls, he said, wheezing faintly. Storms brought wreckage ashore most every season back then. Parish had to reimburse the finders. Men didn't drag up scientific kit for free, you know. Eilith trailed a finger across the labels. Here, March 1830. They pulled the drawer open and eased out the logbook. Its pages were brown-edged but legible, the ink faded but careful. Isla scanned the entries. 2 nets destroyed, force. 1 compass, water-damaged, no maker mark, 2s. Then, iron box with glass coils, brass circle, item surrendered to excise office. Finder paid 15s. Beside it, an initial, H.C. Carrick. Wasn't he supposed to be dead? Isla murmured. He was, Eilith said. Until now. They photographed the page, bagged it for print analysis, and thanked Malcolm, who had already begun repolishing the counter like they'd never been there. Back outside, the air had turned still. No birds, no wind, just a low haze settling along the rooftops of Nairn like smoke from an unseen fire. Monroe met them in the car park. I tested the ink on the newspaper clipping, he said without greeting. The note, "We crossed, seal the breach," was written with the same iron gall mixture as the main article, but it's chemically fresher, different humidity exposure. Same paper stock, same type of pen, but decades apart. "So someone added the note later?" Isla asked. "Yes," Monroe nodded, "but not recently. I'd say early 1900s, maybe a few decades after the clipping was first printed." "Could it have been Elias Wren?" Eilith asked. "Possibly," Monroe said. "Or someone who retrieved the clipping from the wreck and understood what it meant." They returned to Monroe's office, a controlled chaos of annotated maps, open notebooks, antique instruments, and wall-spanning timelines. Isla stepped past a string of red yarn linking points on a 19th century sea chart. "Tell me about this," she said, tapping a photo pinned near the top. Monroe followed her gaze. "That's Wren's last confirmed letter, addressed to the Royal Navy Hydrographic Office. It proposed a northern survey to observe magnetic aberrations along the Moray fault line. He called it the Argante Initiative. It was dismissed. He self-funded the expedition instead." "And that clipping," Isla said, "was the last media mention." Monroe nodded. "Printed July 8, 1829. The Argante departed days later, then nothing, until now." Isla studied the map closer. What if this wasn't an accident? What if the Argante wasn't lost? It was buried. Eilith pointed to a red circle on the wall map, halfway between Nairn and Cromarty Firth, just offshore. "This position lines up with what the clipping calls Northby Survey Point. That's where the Argante was reportedly heading before she disappeared." Monroe nodded. "That area corresponds to a geomagnetic knot, a distortion in compass behavior first noted in Royal Navy logs as early as 1786. Most dismissed it as faulty readings. Wren thought it was a doorway." "To what?" Isla asked. "To time," Monroe said. "But not just time as a line, time as a place." Isla turned to Eilith. "You said something about a ledger, an oral account?" Eilith pulled a folded copy from her satchel. "Parish interviews from Aldern, 1843. A man named Patrick Shaw claimed he saw a ship made of dark light gliding over the bay in silence. Said it left no wake. It appeared on the same date the Carrick Bounty was logged." "Same ship?" Isla asked. Eilith nodded. "Has to be." Monroe crossed the room and turned down the lights. He switched on a monitor showing real-time telemetry from a portable harmonic scanner they'd left above the Fisher site. The readings had begun to climb. "The field is fluctuating," he said. "That pocket in the cave is waking up. Slowly. Predictably." Isla stared at the data. "Meaning?" "If Wren set a return window," Monroe said, "it's opening again. The question is, what's scheduled to come back through?" The coastline, that night. Waves rolled quietly over the shale, a soft shooshing-like breath against skin. Isla stood on the cliff's edge with a flask of black coffee going cold in her hand. She stared out at the bay. Lights from oil tankers blinked on the horizon, but inland, the shore was unnaturally still. Her thoughts kept circling the same image, the two men on the beach, one with a look of terrified awe frozen on his face, the other clutching that impossible watch. If they had succeeded in crossing, where had they expected to emerge? And had they made it intact? She heard steps behind her. Monroe joined her in silence. "You said this might be a return window," she said. He nodded. "That's what the watches suggest. But the Argante didn't just carry explorers." He paused. "It carried a device, something Wren referred to as the harmonic core. That's what powered the breach. You think it's coming back? I think part of it already has." Beneath the surface of the Moray Firth, something stirred. Sonar buoys positioned by the Coast Guard began to register abnormal pulses, short rhythmic bursts echoing from the seafloor. The pattern was too regular for seismic activity, too refined for marine life, but unmistakably mechanical. Inverness University, Temporary Analysis Lab. Monroe stood over the Carrick watch, now mounted in a stabilized vacuum cradle. A microphone inside the case picked up micro-resonances, the sound of gears shifting against phantom pressure, not clockwork wear, but resistance. The watch was reacting. Next to it, the museum anchor had gone from ticking sporadically to sinking precisely, matching second for second. He adjusted the spectrometer and focused on the blue-tinted alloy lining both devices. The composition defied classification: tin, iron, and something else. An untraceable paramagnetic element that shouldn't exist. It refracted EM readings. It absorbed frequency. He muttered aloud, almost to himself, This metal isn't from 1829. Meanwhile, Isla and Eilith had returned to the cave. The entrance was flooded, the tide halfway up the rocks, but the cliffside above remained dry and climbable. Eilith scrambled halfway to a ledge once used by surveyors and shouted down. "There's a carving up here." Isla climbed to meet her, in the stone, worn but legible. "Sound the second, lock the ark, never return." Beneath it, the initials E.W. Wren had come back, not just once, multiple times. He had reopened the breach and sealed it again, and now, someone, or something, was unlocking it once more. That night, CCTV from the harbour caught a new anomaly. At 2:14 a.m., 3 fishing boats anchored offshore began to list sideways. Not from wind, not from current, but from a distortion in gravity. Objects on deck rolled uphill, water climbed rails in reverse, and metal compass rings snapped clean from their mounts. Every GPS system within a 10-mile radius failed. Police briefing room, 6 a.m. Isla played the video for the team in silence. The footage ended. No one spoke. Then Isla said flatly, "Whatever Wren left behind, it's surfacing." Eilith nodded, pale, and he tried to warn us. That phrase, "seal the breach," wasn't dramatic, it was literal. Monroe entered with fresh telemetry. The field cycle completes in 48 hours. If the anchor phases fully, the harmonic core could manifest anywhere within a 6-mile radius. "Manifest what?" Isla asked. He looked up slowly. "Then," he said, "a fragment of 1829. Chapter 4. The Cave and the Storm. The storm arrived ahead of schedule. The Met Office had predicted light rain and moderate winds along the Moray Firth. What slammed into the coast that evening was something else. Violent, sudden, and without precedent. Sheets of rain drove sideways through the streets of Nairn. Lightning split the horizon in frantic pulses, and the sea frothed like something enraged beneath the surface. D.I. Isla Mackenzie drove through it, windshield wipers thudding uselessly against the deluge. The headlights barely pierced 10 feet of visibility, but she knew where she was going. Back to the cave. She kept one hand on the wheel, the other on the radio. "DS Dre, you copy?" Static. Then, copy. Barely. East access paths washed out. We're rerouting through the farm road. Isla grit her teeth. "Get Monroe and Eilith to the bluff. We can't risk entering through the shore." More static. Then silence. The harmonic readings had begun to spike at 1702, and at 1706, every watch in the evidence locker, including those that hadn't worked in decades, started ticking in perfect unison. Meanwhile, Monroe's flat, 5:30 p.m. Monroe shoved books and papers into a canvas satchel while Eyelid strapped the harmonic sensor to her back. The latest scan showed that the cave fisher's resonance was now 43.4% above baseline. That level of harmonic interference could destabilize more than just instruments. It could distort perception, even memory. "I need to say this out loud," Monroe said, cinching the straps. "This is no longer theoretical. If the harmonic core fully breaches tonight, we could see more than fragments." "You mean the past?" Eilith asked. "I mean a collision, not just glimpses. Overlay, physical material from 1829 appearing in our time. Or worse, time folding both ways." She paled. "Could something come through?" He nodded once. "Something already has." The cliff top, 6:12 p.m. Isla met them at the gate near the sheep pastures. The rain turned everything to sludge. Visibility dropped to meters. Thunder cracked directly overhead. Together, they descended the narrow trail toward the fisher, Monroe clutching the padded case containing both original watches. Eilith carried the sensor. Isla, a waterproof torch and a sidearm she hoped she wouldn't need. At the cliff's edge, a narrow ledge led to the overlook above the cave. From there, they could see the sea boiling as if it had swallowed something electric. Then the sound began. Not thunder, not wind. A bell. Faint at first, then stronger. A ship's bell ringing from just offshore. Rhythmic. Hollow. Calling. Eyelid froze. That's not possible. Isla scanned the surf with binoculars. And then she saw it. A black mast. Cloth furled tight. A pale lamp swinging in midair. Half in fog, half in sea spray. The Argante. The mast vanished, then reappeared 20 meters to the left. It wasn't sailing. It was flickering, phasing in and out like a poorly rendered hologram. The outline of the ship seemed unstable, its rigging pulsing with bursts of static blue light. And beneath it, where the sea should have surged around its hull, was nothing but distortion, water held unnaturally still, as if frozen in the moment before a wave broke. Monroe lowered the binoculars. It's trying to stabilize. What is? Ela asked. The Argante. Wren's harmonic core must be close. It's responding to the anchor's pull. Eilith whispered. It's not just a ship anymore, is it? Monroe shook his head. No, it's a machine, a displaced time chamber. That's why the crew didn't age. That's why the corpses were fresh. Isla stepped back from the ledge and turned toward the cave entrance, just as another blast of thunder rolled across the cliffs. The entrance was now shuddering with a dull, rhythmic vibration, like a living drum. The waterline had crept higher. We don't have long, she said. Get the equipment inside. I want everything documented. If this opens up, we're going to need proof. Inside the cave, the hum grew louder. Not mechanical. Musical. A resonant tone that echoed off the walls, vibrating in their chests. The harmonic anchor embedded in the fissure had begun to glow faintly, rings of blue and gold pulsing around its exposed edges like ripples across a liquid mirror. Eilith approached first, her voice hushed. There's something coming through the breach. Monroe activated the scanner. Temperature drop, 4.6 degrees. Pressure drop, 17 millibars. EM resonance, unstable. And then, like a strobe flash behind their eyes, they saw it. A hallway. Iron-plated, lit by lanterns bolted to walls. Footsteps, boots. A man in a high-coloured coat shouting orders. The sensation of wind and salt and time snapping like overstretched cord. Then darkness, then cave. Isla stumbled back. What the hell was that? Monroe's face was pale, a bleed-through. The timelines are aligning. Water sloshed behind them, unnaturally high. When Isla turned, she saw wet boot prints on the stone floor. Fresh. Leading into the cave. Elid's voice was barely audible. We didn't make those. The air pulsed again, 3 hard jolts, and the harmonic anchor screamed in high frequency. Both pocket watches on Monroe's wrist stopped ticking at the exact same moment. Then someone, stepped into view at the back of the fissure chamber. A figure, wearing a soaked explorer's coat, eyes sunken, mouth slack, skin taut and wrong. He looked at Monroe and spoke one phrase. The arc collapsed. I held it as long as I could. Then he fell forward, dead before he hit the ground. Silence collapsed over the cave like a blanket of ash. The body lay motionless on the stone. Rainwater steamed off his coat in wisps. His skin was pale, almost translucent. He had been dead for minutes, maybe hours, but the blood on his lips was still warm. Monroe knelt and carefully turned the man over. The face was gaunt, cheekbones pronounced, jaw sharp under thin skin. His clothing matched the others, early 19th century expedition wear, but the jacket bore a stitched monogram above the breast pocket, E.W. Elias Wren. I don't believe it, Ela muttered. He came through. No, Monroe said, his voice thin. He was pushed through. Look. Pinned to Wren's chest with a brass tack was a scrap of vellum, shaking in the cave's shifting air. On it, a message. Sever the link. Burn the core. We are trapped inside time. Suddenly, the harmonic anchor flared, a surge of blue-white energy blooming from its rings. The watches in Monroe's case began ticking again, but now they weren't synchronized. They were arguing, each ticking at different speeds, like 2 hearts out of rhythm. The scanner shorted out. Monroe stepped back. The breach is destabilizing. This isn't a fixed opening, it's expanding. We've gone from a crack to a tear. Eilith shouted over the rising hum. Can we shut it? We can sever the anchor, Monroe said. That's what he meant by burn the core, but it might cut off whatever's left of the Argante, crew, device, everything, on the other side. Isla looked down at Wren's corpse. And if we don't? Monroe's eyes were hard. The past comes through, all of it. Isla turned. Evacuate the chamber. Tag and recover the body. I want all personnel out, and this site locked down. But the core, Elith started. We're not destroying anything until we know what we're destroying, Ela said. That tear doesn't just lead backward. If time is folding in both directions, we don't know what's next. Later that night, Inverness Morgue. The body of Elias Wren lay on the table beneath a white sheet. No decomposition, no water damage, no signs of trauma. In his hand, clenched even in death, was a second note. They'd missed it before, folded inside the cuff of his shirt. Isla read it aloud. The tide has a memory, and it's begun to remember everything. Chapter 5. Into the Breach. July 10th, 1829. Cromarty Firth. Scotland. The Argante rocked gently in the bay's early morning stillness, sails furled, mooring ropes taut against the tide. The sun had not yet risen beyond the hills. But the crew was already at work, quiet, precise, rehearsed. This was no ordinary expedition, and they all knew it. Below deck, in the belly of the ship, Elias Wren stood hunched over a brass table scattered with diagrams, spools of copper wire, and 3 identical pocket watches. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from exhaustion. He hadn't slept in over 36 hours. Across from him, Henry Carrick read aloud from a leather-bound logbook. Final calibration complete. Both anchors now aligned to the 56.42-degree northern seam. Magnetic yield fluctuating, but within acceptable range. Wren nodded, eyes fixed on the rotating mechanism at the table's center, a spherical housing of etched rings, humming with an almost imperceptible frequency. "This is it," Wren said. "If we engage the anchor before the tide turns, the field should fold. We'll emerge 6 minutes past the breach curve, ahead of local time." Carrick looked up. "And if the harmonics drift?" "We return," Wren said. "Or we're unmoored, trapped in a non-local temporal echo. But either way, we make history." Carrick gave a dry smile. "Or become ghosts." Elias Wren had never believed in ghosts, but he did believe in echoes. Since the age of 16, he had felt them, moments repeating in strange symmetry, déjà vu that lasted entire conversations. Once, on the Isle of Lewis, he had watched a bird fall from the sky, only to rise again in reverse motion for 3 full seconds before dropping a second time. No one else saw it. Since then, he had been obsessed. Carrick handed him a quill. "Sign the log. This becomes your final entry unless we succeed." Wren hesitated. July 10th, 1829. The Argante is prepared for harmonic displacement. Our destination, fold line 5642, 3EE. We will attempt controlled transition at 7:19 a.m. If recovered, seal the breach. He set the pen down. "The others?" he asked. Carrick answered, "Below deck, standing by." Wren retrieved one of the pocket watches and placed it inside a circular cavity of the core housing. The other 2 were stored in lead-lined cases, one to remain on the ship, the second buried in a coastal marker stone near Nairn. "One for the ship," he murmured. "One for the land, one for the bridge." The ship's bell rang once. It was time. As Wren climbed to the deck, the morning mist parted. The sea had gone unnaturally calm, a glass sheet reflecting sky like a perfect mirror. He turned to Carrick. "Ready?" Carrick took a breath. "No." Then he smiled grimly. "But let's do it anyway." July 10th, 1829, to 7:16 a.m. Aboard the Argante, wind fell still. The crew, 8 in total, all hand-picked by Wren and Carrick, stood frozen, eyes locked on the strange device bolted to the main deck. The harmonic core, now fully assembled, pulsed with a faint light between its rotating rings. The resonance had intensified, audible now, a low, wavering tone like a tuning fork buried in the bones. Elias Wren stood beside the device, one hand resting lightly on its copper outer casing. His pocket watch ticked in rhythm with the core, so did Carrick's. And the ship's magnetic compass? Spinning, endlessly. "Positions," Wren called. The men moved without question. Carrick crouched by the junction box, checking the binding coils. Sparks jumped between copper spokes, and the smell of ionized air filled the deck. A line of salt crust formed along the railing where seawater had recently splashed, now evaporated in a localized heat bloom. Wren opened a brass chamber on the core's underside and inserted the 3rd pocket watch. It slid into place with a click. The device whined. Carrick called out readings. Magnetic yield holding. Temporal offset, -2 minutes, and climbing. The world trembled. Wren raised his voice over the rising hum. "Once the core enters harmonic flux, we'll cross the threshold. Stay inside the perimeter." 7:19 a.m. The Argante vanished from view. Not with a flash or explosion, but a quiet ripple. From the shoreline, any distant observer would have seen the ship blur at the edges and then fold in on itself like a mirage collapsing. The water remained still. The wake ceased. Time, for a moment, forgot to move. Nowhere, or everywhere. The ship groaned. Light bled through the seams of the deck. Unreal colors, impossibly slow. The sky above warped to a violet haze, fractured by arcs of electricity that didn't quite touch the mast. Wren gripped the railing. The harmonic core screamed, its rings spinning faster than physically possible. Carrick shouted, "Trajectory slipping, field collapsing." "No," Wren roared. "Reinforce the outer casing, anchor to the pulse." But it was too late. A sudden shockwave burst outward from the core. The casing split. The anchoring watch ejected violently. spinning across the deck and striking Carrick in the chest. He staggered, then disappeared. Gone. No scream, no blood, just gone. "Henry!" Wren shouted, stumbling toward the spot where his friend had stood. But there was only mist, and beyond it, something else. Figures. Dozens of them. Blurred men in modern coats, lights, machines, sounds. Wren didn't understand. He glimpsed a camera, a woman in a high-vis vest, a police drone. The future. It flickered past the ship like a film run backward, then forward again, time spooling in both directions. And then, it broke. Wren screamed as the deck buckled. The core's base melted into the wood, rings shuddering wildly. The air burned, his skin blistered, his mind fractured. His last thought before the darkness took him was not of science or legacy, it was of Carrick. "I sent him too far." Wren woke to damp stone beneath his cheek. The sound of water dripping nearby. Darkness, but not the darkness of a ship's hold or the cold silence of the sea. This was different. The air smelled of metal and ozone, and something stranger? Soap? Disinfectant? He opened his eyes. The cave was dimly lit by a single portable LED lantern left behind by the forensics team. Shadows danced across mineral walls. Wren groaned, tried to rise, but pain lanced through his chest like shattered glass. He collapsed again, coughing blood into the dust. "Carrick," he whispered. "Henry." No reply. He looked down. His coat was torn. The sleeve bore a stitched patch, still intact. Inside it, his final message remained folded. He coughed again, then reached for the anchor embedded in the rock nearby. The harmonic core, its fragments, long since fused to the stone, pulsed softly, sensing him. It recognized its maker, and for a few moments it stabilized the breach. Enough for him to see. He saw two women standing on the cave ledge, one in a modern parka, the other holding a device that glowed green in the dark. They didn't look like ghosts. They looked like future. Wren tried to call out, but all that escaped was a breath, a whisper. Sever the link, burn the core. Then everything slipped sideways again. He was falling backward, through light and shadow. And then, nothing. Inverness Morgue, present day. Pathologist Fiona White stood over the autopsy table, dictating into her recorder. Subject appears male, Caucasian, estimated age 35 to 40, no external trauma. Cause of death, cardiac arrest. Noteworthy, subject displays no bloating, no livor mortis. Estimated time of death, uncertain. Unique features include early 19th century clothing in pristine condition and a handwritten note sewn into jacket lining. She paused, then read it aloud. "We are trapped inside time. Sever the link. Burn the core." She lowered the paper, glancing toward the steel drawer where the first two bodies had been stored, then back to Wren's lifeless face. "Mark as high-priority anomaly. Notify D.I. Mackenzie immediately." Far from the morgue, in Monroe's flat, two pocket watches ticked out of sync, just once, then again, together, then again, faster, and then they stopped. Chapter 6, The Return Effect. The breach didn't open with fanfare. There was no lightning tearing the sky, no grand rift in space, just small, wrong things, stacking quietly across the edges of reality. It began with the clocks. Royal Bank of Scotland, Inverness Branch, 9:14 a.m. The teller's wall clock ticked backward. Not a glitch, not a power surge. The second hand reversed, tick by deliberate tick, for 12 full seconds before snapping forward again. None of the staff noticed, until all the computer terminals crashed at once. Timestamp errors. All system logs scrambled. Date, July 11, 1829. A rural petrol station near Alden. Security footage from 3:21 a.m. showed a hooded figure entering the shop, walking past the camera, then appearing again on the opposite side of the screen. Twice. Perfect mirror movement. Same gait, same head tilt, same boot scuff on the floor mat. Police reviewed the footage 5 times. The timestamp read, Loop 4031441. At 10:03 a.m., a satellite relay over the Moray Firth began transmitting a distress ping from itself, specifically from its backup memory, a burst of data repeating the same phrase in Morse code, "We returned." Inverness HQ, briefing room, D.I. Isla Mackenzie stood before a dry erase board crowded with maps, time anomalies, and post-mortem reports. Monroe sat nearby, scrolling through harmonic field data. Eilith paced slowly, reading Wren's journal for the 6th time. "We have 3 separate indicators that the breach is widening," Isla said, pointing to the satellite ping, the CCTV footage, and a photo of a shattered 19th century compass discovered inside a functioning Tesla glove box near Nairn. Each event is getting closer. Closer to what? She asked. Monroe didn't look up. To the fold point, he said. He rose and tapped a map layered with overlapping topographical scans and harmonic field fluctuations. This zone right here, 6.2 miles across, is the convergence field. The breach didn't just let something through. It created a temporal pull zone. Think of it like gravity, but for time. Anything caught too close will start to slip. Slip how? Dre asked from the corner. Monroe turned. Memories won't line up. Identities will fracture. People may forget what year they're in. Or worse, remember things that haven't happened yet. Time's fighting to stay cohesive, but the more we observe it, the more it observes us. Inverness HQ, 12:32 p.m. Eilith stood in front of the mirror in the station washroom, staring at her own reflection as if it belonged to someone else. Her hands were shaking, not from cold, from familiarity. She didn't recognize the ring on her left hand, a plain silver band, scuffed around the edges, but it fit perfectly. Too perfectly. She wasn't married. Was she? She checked her phone. No recent calls. No photos of anyone who looked like a partner. And yet, when she touched the band, a name surfaced in her mind like a bruise rising to the skin. Nathan. We married in 2017. No, 2023. No, we haven't yet, have we? She stumbled back from the sink. She turned off the light, turned it back on. In the mirror, for just a split second, she was wearing a 19th century corseted blouse beneath her coat. Something high-collared, laced, damp, gone again. Briefing room. Minutes later, Isla turned as Eilid entered, pale and silent. Monroe noticed too. Are you all right? Eilith didn't answer. She sat down slowly, holding her hands in her lap. The breach is affecting memory, Monroe said. Even identity. It's not just letting the past through, it's mixing timelines. People on the edges of the convergence field are beginning to carry traits, objects, even lives they haven't lived yet. Isla looked at Eilith. What did you see? She hesitated. Then, a ring. She placed it on the table. It had weight, warmth, and an engraving on the inside. E.R. H.C. Carrick, Henry Carrick. Eilith. Monroe leaned forward. You might be more connected to this than we thought. At that moment, the station lights flickered. All the wall clocks froze at 12:44. In the evidence locker, both recovered pocket watches began ticking again, in reverse. Monroe stared at the engraving inside the ring. ERHC. It wasn't just a monogram. It was a union, a marker of two individuals bound together. He looked at Eilith, still pale, hands twitching faintly, and the pieces began to fall into place. What if you're not just connected by chance? He asked. What if you're descended from him, from Carrick? She blinked. That's not possible. There's no record of. There wouldn't be, Isla cut in. If Carrick crossed into this time even briefly, his presence would have been suppressed. Officially, he died in 1829. But if he slipped through and lived, even for days, he could have left a trace, a child, a bloodline. Eilith looked down at the ring again. I've never seen this before, but it feels like it was always mine. Monroe's office, later that evening. The genealogical records arrived via encrypted PDF from Edinburgh's historical archives. Wren's family line ended in 1829. No spouse, no heirs. Carrick, on the other hand, had a surviving sister, Maeve Carrick, who mysteriously vanished from the records just after 1830. No death certificate, just a new name that appeared 1 year later on the parish register for Nairn, Maeve Rennie. Eilith's great-great-grandmother. You carry the blood of a man who crossed time, Monroe said. That's why you're being affected first. Eilith sat motionless. Then I'm a what? A temporal echo? No, he said. You're a tether, a human anchor. Isla narrowed her eyes. Which means, Monroe straightened, if we sever the breach, she might be pulled with it. The harmonic field scanner beeped twice. Anomalous activity, confirmed. Coordinates 56.42 degrees just offshore. The original fold point. Monroe looked up at Isla. It's happening again. The Argante's returning, this time fully. Isla stood. Then we meet it there. Chapter 7. The Argante reappears. North of Nairn, July 12th, 04:46 a.m. The sky was the colour of lead. Clouds hung heavy and low, like curtains waiting to fall. The sea beyond the cliffline looked wrong. Not stormy, not calm, just still, as if the tide itself was holding its breath. On the bluff overlooking the water, Ela, Monroe, Eilith, and D.S. Dre stood in silence. They'd brought no backup, no broadcast equipment, no official witnesses. Just a tracker tuned to the core's frequency and 2 pocket watches ticking in uneasy harmony. Elith clutched the original Carrack watch in both hands. It pulsed with a soft blue light. "Any movement?" Ela asked. Monroe checked the scanner. "Field resonance has stabilized. We're right on the edge of the breach." He paused. "And something's coming through." The fog thickened over the water, then parted. A mast. Just one, at first. Blackened, rigid, rising through the mist like a grave marker. Then more. Rigging. Deck rails. The dark hull of a 19th century ship that had no business still existing. The Argante. It hovered, not on the water, but in it, halfway submerged, like time hadn't yet decided where it belonged. Lights flickered along the rail. Lanterns that hadn't burned in nearly 2 centuries sputtered into life. No crew, no sound, just the ship and the low, endless toll of its bell. Eilith took a slow step forward. She felt it deep in her chest. A pulse, not her own, like the ship itself recognized her, or remembered her. "I know this place," she said. Ela didn't speak. Dre raised binoculars. No signs of movement aboard, no distress flag, but, Jesus, it's real. Monroe approached the cliff edge with deliberate care. If the ship's returned, then the core is still intact. "Inside?" Ela asked. Monroe nodded. "We need to board. Now. Before the breach destabilizes again." Isla looked from him to Eilith. "We'll go." They reached the ship by a small inflatable craft launched from a private marina just south of the breach zone. The fog thickened the closer they got, curling in the boat's wake like fingers. As they approached, the hull of the Argante loomed above them, impossibly preserved, the wood blackened but intact, the brass fixtures untarnished. It creaked as though aware of their presence. No crew, no flags. Only a single rope ladder hung down the starboard side, newer than it should have been. Monroe climbed first. Then Ela. Then Eilith. The Carrack watch tucked into her coat like a compass heart. The deck was slick with condensation. Lanterns flickered in their wrought iron mounts, though no oil could be seen in their basins. Every sound was dulled, as if they weren't quite in the present anymore. The ship groaned softly beneath them, not from the sea, but from something deeper. "Time fatigue," Eilith whispered. "It's like it's stuck between seconds." They moved aft toward the main cabin. Monroe placed one hand on the railing, then pulled it back sharply. "Warm. Sunlight?" Ela asked. "No," Monroe said. "Resonance heat." Inside the cabin, dust lay untouched across the navigator's table. Charts were pinned in place with brass weights, bearing hand-inked notations in Wren's distinct script. One corner of the map had been torn away. On the exposed timber beneath, someone had scratched a single line. "The field does not end, it bends." Beside it, a brass-bound chest lay partially open. Ela knelt and lifted the lid. Inside, a second harmonic core, smaller than the first, still intact, still pulsing. Eilith took a step forward. The Carrack watch in her coat pocket began ticking again. Only now, it was in perfect unison with the core. "Monroe," she said, voice thin. He turned. "I think this one knows me." Monroe crouched and examined the casing. "This isn't the original core." "What is it?" Ela asked. He looked up. "It's a failsafe, a secondary lock. This isn't meant to power the breach, it's meant to seal it." Eilith whispered. "Then why is it still ticking?" Suddenly, the ship jolted. A groan echoed through the hull, not from water, but from time itself. Deckboards vibrated. Brass instruments on the cabin wall began spinning. Monroe looked at the readings. "It's too late. The fold's trying to reclaim the Argante." "Ela, can we stop it?" He glanced at Eilith, her eyes glassy, locked on the glowing core. "Only if she anchors it." The harmonic core pulsed stronger now. Every ring vibrated with invisible tension, like a tuning fork humming inside Eilith's skull. The ticking of the Carrack watch in her pocket matched it perfectly, as if they were old friends reuniting after centuries. She stepped forward. The glow from the core brightened in response. Ela reached for her shoulder. "You don't have to do this." Eilith didn't move. "I think I already did." "What does that mean?" Monroe answered instead. "She's part of the loop, a living tether, descended from the breach itself. Her presence was always part of the equation. That's why the watchers work with her. That's why the ship came back now." Elith opened her coat and took out the Carrack watch. It ticked twice, then fell silent. She placed it into the secondary core's cavity. The entire Argante shifted beneath their feet, wood creaking, air folding, pressure changing. Outside the cabin window, the sea warped, white caps slowed mid-crest. Gulls hung frozen in mid-flight. The world stopped spinning. The core spun once, then locked. A sound like a breath held, then exhaled, then silence. Monroe's scanner flatlined. No resonance, he said. It's done. The fold was sealed. Time corrected. The breach was closed. Eilith opened her eyes. She was alone in the cabin. No Isla, no Monroe, no Argante, only white mist. Then, a voice behind her. You sealed it. She turned. Henry Carrick stood in the mist, younger than she remembered from the photo, his face lined but kind. She felt her throat close. You came through, he nodded once. You brought us home. Then he stepped backward into the light. And was gone. Isla blinked. They were back on the cliff. The sea was calm. The sky had cleared. No ship, no breach, just waves. Monroe stood beside her, clutching one pocket watch. It was broken. The hands frozen at 0719. Isla looked around. Where's Eilith? Monroe's voice cracked. She stayed. Chapter 8. Wren's Confession. July 13th, 6:42 a.m. Inverness HQ. The sun returned without ceremony. No thunderclap. No rip in the sky. Just a thin morning light slipping through the blinds of the evidence room, as DE Ela Mackenzie stared at the small brass watch on the table, once warm, once ticking, now silent forever. The hands were frozen at 0719, the same time recorded in Wren's final log, the same time the Argante had disappeared in 1829. The breach was closed, but Elith was gone. Monroe stood across from her, pale, hollow-eyed, still dusted with sea salt and disbelief. She knew what she was doing, he said. Ela didn't respond. She wasn't sure if she agreed, or if she just didn't want to argue with reality. Instead, she pointed to the table. What is that? Monroe turned the broken watch over. Inside the back casing, etched in minuscule copperplate script, was something he hadn't noticed before. A folded piece of parchment, sealed with wax. The stamp, a stylized W inside a compass rose. Elias Wren's personal seal. Monroe cracked the wax and unfolded the brittle parchment. The writing was hurried, jagged. He read aloud. To the finder of this anchor, know that I never meant to break the world. The breach was only meant to observe, but we touched the past too deeply, and it clung to us. Carrick crossed first, not by design. The arc buckled, the Argante drifted. If you are reading this, then one of us made it through. Perhaps both, perhaps neither. But if the anchor still responds, you are standing on the edge of a fold that must be sealed. If it reopens, there will be more, not ships, not men, but time itself, raw and without tether. You must not let it through. Burn the core, bury the watches, and tell the world nothing. History must forget us. Elias Wren. Isla closed her eyes. We didn't bury it. No, Monroe said. We lived it. She picked up the watch and held it to her ear. No sound, but in her mind she could still hear Ilad's voice. You don't have to do this. I think I already did. July 13th, 1911, Monroe's flat. Monroe sat in the dark, bathed in the blue glow of harmonic field telemetry data on his screen. The breach had sealed. The core had gone dormant. Eilith was gone. But the numbers didn't lie. The background resonance, supposed to return to baseline, had plateaued just above zero. A faint signal still hummed through the instruments. A whisper, like a thread stretched taut. He replayed Wren's final warning in his head. Burn the core, bury the watches, tell the world nothing. But the core hadn't burned. They hadn't buried anything. Not really. And if the fold was more than a singular breach, what if it had branches? What if Eilith hadn't sealed the only opening? He called up GPS logs from the previous week, overlaying them with known magnetic anomalies along the coast. There, a new spike. Latitude 574765 Zen. Longitude 4.2316 Dubnera Loch. Nowhere near Nairn, but the reading was unmistakable. Harmonic echo 0.37 Hz. Same frequency as the Argante core. A second fold? Or a leftover wound? He reached for his satchel. Inside, his own pocket watch, the one given to him by an uncle who never existed in any official records. It had started ticking again, just faintly. Monroe stared at it and whispered, You're still here, aren't you? That same night, deep forest, Cairngorms National Park. A hiker stumbled across a clearing where the air felt wrong, heavy and still, like the moments before lightning strikes. At its center, a wooden post, blackened by time. Nailed to it, a rusted brass plate, engraved with 3 words, Seal the breach. July 14th, 6:03 a.m. Inverness HQ. Isla Mackenzie sat alone at her desk. She stared at a blank incident form. Her pen hovered above the box labelled Witnesses or Civilian Consultants Involved in Event. She tried to write Eyelid Rennie. The ink didn't flow. She checked the pen full. Tried again. This time, she wrote E. Rennie without thinking. Then frowned. She couldn't remember Eyelid's middle name. Had she ever known it? She reached for her phone and searched her contacts. No Eilith, not even a call log. She checked the case file. Nowhere was Eilith listed. Not in the search reports, not in the field scans, not in the interview logs, not even in the original team assignment roster. It was like she'd never been part of the investigation at all. Except the ring, still in Isla's desk drawer. Plain silver, engraved, ER. HC. That night she dreamed of the sea, of the Argante, sailing slowly into mist. No sails, no crew, only one person at the helm. A woman, wearing a coat Ela recognized but couldn't name. As the ship vanished into the fog, a whisper echoed from the waves. "You don't have to do this. I think I already did." Ela woke up with salt water on her cheek. No storm, no breach. Just a watch on her nightstand, still ticking. Chapter 9. Closing the Veil. July 15th. 4:07 a.m. Cairngorms National Park. The trees whispered. Not with wind, but with presence, like something ancient had passed through them hours before, and the forest hadn't finished recovering. D.I. Isla Mackenzie ducked under a low pine branch, boots heavy with mud, flashlight cutting through a pale mist that had refused to lift since midnight. Monroe followed close behind, his pack thudding softly against his back with every step. "Signal's still steady," he said. "Harmonic echo holding at 0.3. "Same frequency as the Argante core," Isla replied. "You think this is another breach?" "I think it's a scar," Monroe said. "Not wide enough to bring something through, but deep enough to bleed." They crested a ridge, below them, a clearing, undisturbed, no trail in, no signs of footfall. Only a single post burned black and half swallowed by the earth, a rusted brass plate nailed to the wood. "Seal the breach." Isla approached, heart thudding. "It's the same phrase," she said. "Wren's warning." Monroe knelt at the base of the post, dug into the soil with his gloved hands. After 5 inches, he struck something hard. A lockbox. He pulled it free and popped the latches. Inside, a third watch. Unlike the others, this one wasn't ticking. It was vibrating. Slow, measured, like the beat of a distant heart. "It's active," Monroe breathed, "but it's not calibrated. It's waiting." "For what?" Isla asked. Monroe looked up. "For someone to claim it." Ela stepped back. "Eilith." "She was the tether," Monroe said. "That means someone else. Has to be the lock." The forest stood still. The air around the lockbox was warmer than the surrounding clearing, the kind of heat that came not from sun or fire, but friction. A low-frequency hum built around them like the hush before a landslide. Monroe held the third watch in his palm. The vibration intensified with his touch. He felt it down to the marrow. Isla paced the edge of the glade. "No one knows this is here. No one should know. Why bury it in a place like this?" "Because it was never meant to be found," Monroe replied. "This isn't an anchor." He turned the watch over and pointed to the casing, a different engraving than the others. "Final seal. Do not return." "This is the lock," Monroe said. "The permanent one. Not harmonic. Not magnetic. Biological." Isla stared at him. "Biological? It needs a tether," he said quietly. "A living connection. One who's touched the fold, one who's crossed its path." Her breath caught. "You're not saying—" "Yes," Monroe said. "Whoever activates this watch becomes the lock. No more echoes. No more anomalies. The field collapses back in on itself." "Eilith was the tether," Isla said. "And I," Monroe whispered, "am the key." Isla's voice cracked. "You've seen the future. That flash, that moment, the Argante, the breach. You felt it more than any of us." "That's why I have to do it," he said. He pressed the watch into her hand. "Take it, and when I say go, close it." She shook her head. "You don't have to do this." He smiled, the same tired smile Wren wore in the last journal sketch. "I think I already did." The clearing shuddered. Somewhere in the trees a flock of birds erupted without sound. The ground beneath them pulsed. The air split, not with light, but with memory. Monroe stepped into the center of the glade, palms open. The watch ticked once, then twice. Isla watched as his image blurred slightly, edges warping like heat through glass. He was still there, but also not. A moment before the fold. a man caught in both centuries. Now, he said. Isla snapped the watch closed. The sound echoed louder than thunder. The clearing vanished in white. The clearing was empty. No birds, no hum, no shimmer in the air, just trees swaying gently under a grey morning sky, the faint scent of pine and damp soil rising with the light. Isla stood alone, her hands still gripped the now-closed pocket watch. Its weight had changed, heavier, cold. The lockbox lay open at her feet. Inside, the brass had gone dull, the interior fabric scorched black around the indentation where the watch had once rested. It was sealed now, truly, and Monroe was gone. 2 days later, Inverness HQ. No one asked where Monroe had gone. His office was cleared without ceremony, his ID badge left deactivated on Isla's desk. When asked, Isla simply said, transferred to civilian research. It was true, in a way. The breach was closed. The Argante was gone. No more time echoes, no more ghosts in the field. But the ring in Isla's drawer, ERHC, remained. She couldn't remember who gave it to her, but she couldn't throw it away. That night, she walked the beach. Low tide exposed a strip of rock she'd never noticed before, dotted with iron bolts embedded deep into the stone, rusted but deliberately spaced. She crouched and touched one, a pulse, then nothing. In the dark, she pulled out the third watch. It no longer ticked, but she wore it anyway. Epilogue. August 1st, 08:44 a.m. National Library of Scotland, Edinburgh. A brown envelope arrived by ordinary post. No return address, no stamp. Just a wax seal bearing a compass rose and the initials EW. Inside, a single page, handwritten on aged paper. It had been addressed to the watchkeeper, whoever still remembers. The letter read, "If you are reading this, the veil has closed, the fold has been sealed. Good. That means time is trying to forget us. Let it. I once believed time was a river, something to be studied, mapped, even diverted. But time is not a river. It is a mirror. It gives back what we send into it, only warped by distance, memory, and consequence. We tried to step across that mirror, and we cracked it. There will be others who try. Curiosity is our inheritance, but so is regret. Let the past sleep, bury the watches, burn the maps, and if the sea whispers to you, turn away. You do not want what it remembers." Elias Wren, Northby Fold, 1829. The librarian who opened the letter filed it under Unclassified Historical Curiosities, Box 14. That night, she dreamed of a ship on still water, moving without wind. When she awoke, she found a silver ring on her nightstand. It was engraved ERHC.